All right, we just got the first 2 episodes of Skeleton Crew. We're going to talk about them, and I'm happy to say I'm glad I was wrong. I was a bit worried about this show. I was worried that Disney seemed to be somewhat shielding it from reviews, but this was, I think, among the best of the Disney Plus show premieres. I guess what I was most surprised by is just how well the central premise works. This is The Goonies or even Pirates of the Caribbean in Star Wars, and although sometimes I feel like it veers a little too far into that direction, overall, we got something that ends up being a lot of fun. My first thought was that this feels like something straight out of the 1990s when it comes to Star Wars, and I mean that in the best way. Whether it was the Bantam era of books, or I saw someone else say perhaps an old RPG sourcebook adventure, this felt both connected to the overall universe, but still an interesting, kind of self-contained storyline. Not to say that Skeleton Crew will necessarily remain its own thing. I can very easily see this tying into Ahsoka or The Mandalorian. I mean, we've already seen some connections. The pirate vein, for example, is in both. But this does feel like a new exploration of the galaxy, and really that's part of the reason why I loved those old books and those old source books so much growing up, especially before the prequels. We got a small slice of the universe in the original trilogy, and each new story felt like an adventure which built upon the basics but also took us to new places. So Skeleton Crew does this by introducing us to a brand new planet which we learn seems to be secluded from the rest of the galaxy. I got major Fallout Vault vibes from this planet. To me, it seems innocent on the surface, but there's something maybe about the security droids which gives it an ominous feeling. The Proctor we see in episode 1 refers to the Republic, not the Old Republic. There's this so-called barrier, which I'm guessing may be artificial, which is supposed to keep the planet separate from the rest of the galaxy. I think it's purposely secluded, and that's also why it's just so different than everything else we see in Star Wars. Now, I will admit, I still don't like how Earth-like it is. Houses with garages, downtown cores, and examination halls. It's just a little too much like the real world. You could tell someone, I think, that this was set on Earth 50 years in the future and they'd believe you. But it's an okay starting setting, and I think the show really shines when they move on to the pirate outpost. But speaking of shining, I was definitely a little concerned about a show completely led by child actors. For every Stranger Things, there's an example of a show which just doesn't work because they're children. They don't have the acting experience that grown adults do. However, I thought all the kids in this were great. Neil was definitely a standout, but I thought each one of the children brought an interesting dynamic to the group. As a dad, I gotta say, Wim reminded me a lot of my son and really a lot of boys his age. You know, intelligent, capable, but struggling to fit within all of the rigid requirements of society and school and whatever else. They would rather be using their imagination and having adventures. I just find that his personality is very, very endearing. On the other hand, Fern is like the opposite. She's a lot of bluster, but there's clearly going to be some emerging insecurity and whatever else underneath that. KB appears to be a blank slate and even robotic, but obviously isn't. And I think their dynamic was great. Again, as someone with kids and who was around children, the sort of power dynamics, the struggles, the rules around claiming things and who becomes leader, it all felt very natural and fun. I've got to say, before Skeleton Crew came out, I was a bit worried that the show was going to be more of an imitation of the classic Spielbergian films or the Goonies, the clear bits of inspiration, that it was really just going to be a facade and sort of heartless underneath, but that's definitely not the case. They take the time with the first 2 episodes, and I think that's good. But aside from all that, we also have a pretty good Star Wars show here, which is kind of important. The opening scene was obviously meant to be evocative of A New Hope. We've got a larger ship attacking a smaller ship, troopers standing by. Some of the action was certainly a little silly, which I think will be a long-running theme throughout this show. But sort of 2 thoughts. The alien designs were great. in the opening as they were throughout, and I also really liked that the show managed to be referential without too much of a wink and a nod. Like, yeah, the opening scene was A New Hope, but it threw a bit of a spin on the end where there really was nothing in the vaults, as if in A New Hope it really was just a consular mission. And then from that point, it goes in a completely different direction, of course. It seems obvious, by the way, that Jude Law is Captain Silvo from the very beginning. I'm not even sure if they're attempting to hide that. It seems like the opening sequence takes place, the pirates return to their base, he gets thrown into the brig for getting a bunch of them killed with no benefit. Whether he really is a Jedi or not, I don't know. I'm confident that Jedi will be in the story at some point. You know, Wim is just such a sympathetic character, aside from, as I said, him being a bit of a free spirit in a planet which clearly tries to clamp down on that somewhat. I mean, they're teaching him like data science and he's like 12. He's also clearly lost his mother and his father's way overworked. Doesn't have a lot of time for him. His dream of encountering something Jedi-like is going to pay off. I think that's pretty clear. Overall, though, I gotta say I really liked the new droid. I also liked the special effects. This was, I assume anyway, filmed in the volume, but it looked great. This was some of the best looking Star Wars TV I think we've had, aside from a few kind of iffy moments like at the very beginning. The costume design was great. I love how we see one of the multi-breasted aliens from Return of the Jedi. And yeah, it's definitely a show which will live or die based on how much you like the aesthetics and the theme that they go for. It's unabashedly a pirate adventure 80s Goonies story. If that works for you, I think you'll probably like the first 2 episodes at least. For me, yeah, I'm into it. It's got just enough Star Wars to keep me interested, and I don't have a whole lot to complain about. The episode, the second one in particular, was pretty short, but it's been okay so far. I'm curious to learn more about the central mystery, and I've got to say, so far, most of the online reaction has been pretty positive. And again, I wonder why Disney did not allow reviewers to talk about this show until it actually released. The review embargo dropped at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, the exact same time the episodes dropped. Of all the shows to not have confidence in, this one, which has likable characters, a pretty simple premise, which families should enjoy, good special effects, I think some of the Acolytes marketing budget may have been better directed here. But those are just my thoughts. I'm pretty excited. Let me know your thoughts on all this and more down below.